You have limited resources, but occasionally you do get a little bit extra that you want to put into your hobby as a dungeon master. Let's say you get an extra $50. What would you buy with $50 that would take your game to the next level? Well, that's what we're going to talk about today on today's show. Welcome back to How to Be a Better DM. This is another raw episode, and I'm your host, Justin Lewis, here with you today to talk about what to buy with $50 for your D&D games. And as a reminder, these raw episodes are less edited. There's a lot more personality for sure, or at least hopefully there is. I'm not sure if I have enough personality myself to even put in. Anyways, you get the idea. Also, there's a special rule with these particular episodes. I have a problem with yawning. So if I yawn 5 times, I owe you another episode. So you better be counting because I'm going to be counting, and hopefully I don't get the count wrong. With that said, let's get into it. First thing I want to say, $50 is not always a ton of money, right? For some people, I mean, honestly, for me, $50 is kind of a lot, especially for a hobby. And you want to maximize the use of this extra $50, right? And for this $50, it's more of like a cap. So you could obviously spend less than $50, but if you had $50 and you had to spend it, this is what I would spend it on. And the first thing to note is that in life, you can do anything you want, but you can't do everything. So the same thing goes with $50. I can't make that choice for you. Only you can make that choice. And you'll have to decide what really matters for you. And obviously, what I think is important is probably going to be different than what you think is important, as I've already seen with this kind of content on Instagram. So, without further ado, let's hop in. First thing is a Dungeon Master screen. Now, a lot of you will probably be thinking, why? That's so random. All the information you have on your screen can be found online for free. You're absolutely right. All the cheat sheet stuff you can see on the inside of the screen, on the DM side of the screen, that's online, right? You can find that online. Most people DM with their computers now or with a iPad or tablet or something. So you can look all of that stuff up, no problem. Shoot, there's one. All right, count it. One on the board. The way I see a Dungeon Master screen is I see it as your uniform as the Dungeon Master for the most part, right? In in-person games, that's how I view it. And let me kind of walk myself back. Let me walk you back on my thoughts on that. So we as human beings, we function on signals. And the uniform is a very powerful signal for how we're supposed to behave and act. That's almost why there's ceremonial robes or vestments for most religious organizations. That's why police officers have the badge and kind of their whole kit. That's why firefighters have their kit and honestly their uniform, right? You could be a firefighter without the blue shirt and the blue pants. The boots are probably necessary because they protect your feet. There's more to it than that. But the uniform tells people who you are, and it gives you a certain value or a certain level of authority. So as a dungeon master, what I would recommend is your Dungeon Master screen be part of your uniform. And if you don't want the Dungeon Master to be your uniform, I would suggest you use some of this $50 to kind of help craft your Dungeon Master uniform. Maybe it's a grouping of t-shirts that you always wear when you're a Dungeon Master. Maybe it's kind of the background behind you that helps people register you and give you that level of authority and respect that you're trying to cultivate. Now, having the uniform is not a stand-in for actually being someone who demands respect or has authority, right? Your personality is going to come into play here. But having the authority or having the uniform definitely helps and does not detract. If you see a police officer that is in plain clothes, right, they're going to have to rely on their force of will a lot more than your average police officer who has their bulletproof vest and kind of all the the vestments of their station. So all that said, First thing I would get is a really cool Dungeon Master screen that I would be proud of using. And actually, I've been working on 3D printing a Dungeon Master screen in the last little bit. I've been having some issues with my 3D printer, but I'm almost done with that. And that, moving forward, is going to be my Dungeon Master uniform. Shoot, that's number two. Crap. Okay. The next thing I would buy would be a new Sourcebook. You can buy these online. You can buy them in person or in paper. And I think this is valuable because there's always more to learn, always more material that you can add to your repertoire. As I've been reading recently The Call of the Netherdeep by Wizards of the Coast and Critical Role, I have been struck by how they format their content. And I've been really interested and intrigued, and it's been instructive to me. And I've learned not just the content that I could use in future games, right? For a lot of games, pre-written modules are a very simple way to go, but I've learned better ways. That wasn't a yawn, that was just me breathing. I've learned better ways of formatting how I create content, how I create my one-shots, how I write my campaigns, and even things that I can add in. So adding new source books, awesome investment. Next up is a large papercloth. I said that totally wrong. Next up is a large tablecloth. I guess you could do a paper cloth if that's a thing. I don't know. Large tablecloth and some pipe cleaner. This idea comes from our episode back with Jay from Jay's Tabletop Terrain. That was episode 166, but he recommends using pipe cleaner to symbolize the distance that your characters can move, right? Their speed. So to put this in context, essentially what you would do is you would get pipe cleaner and then you'd measure out 6 inches for 30 feet, and each inch represents a 5 feet increment on your battle space. Now, if you wanted to get fancy, you could probably create some sort of like knot at the front that signifies the starting point, so that way you have something to hold on to, and then you could probably carve notches into the pipe cleaner or put tape around the inch marks so you know each 5 foot increments. But essentially, you can use this pipe cleaner to show walking distance for their speed. And the nice thing is it can bend around things. It can be very flexible. You can even go it up and down if they have a fly speed. Very, very useful. Now, if you want to, you can pair that with a tablecloth or multiple tablecloths that are different colors. If you get a general paper, I said it again, papercloth. Good gravy. Great. Blah, 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 blah. Good gravy. If you pair the pipe cleaner with a tablecloth, let's say it's green, you have an enormous grass field. Or it's gray, and now you have a stone interior of a cave. Obviously, if you wanted to go more in depth, you could probably find someone out there who would custom print. Dang it. That's number 3. Or that's number 4. I can't remember. I'll say it's 3 because I'm doing the podcast and I can do that. But with this massive tablecloth, you have as big of a battle map as you really need. And with pipe cleaner, what more can you want? Spoiler alert, we are building an army. That's right. We're building an army of amazing dungeon masters who want to make the world of D&D a better place. If you want to join our army and fight by our side against the evil forces of boredom and bad DMing, join our Discord and lend your voice to the cause. Go to sessionzerostudios.com/Discord and join for free today. That's sessionzerostudios.com/Discord and enlist in the fight against boredom. You obviously have good taste. I mean, you listen to How to Be a Better DM, after all. We thank you so much for your support. And if you've ever gotten anything useful from How to Be a Better DM, take a minute and rate us and review us on your podcast listening app of choice. It goes a very long way to helping our show help many more Dungeon Masters out there who are just like you. If you love our content, help others become better Dungeon Masters too. When setting any scene, it's imperative that you tap into the 5 senses. When it comes to sound, one of the best ways to do that is with music, ambiance, and sound effects. And that's why we've teamed up with Monument Studios. Monument Studios provides easy-to-use soundboards perfect for dungeon mastering in any setting. If you want to see this in action, go to fantasy-plus.com and get 10% off of your first month when you get their Fantasy Plus app by using the code BETTERDM at checkout. Again, that's fantasy-plus.com and BETTERDM at checkout. Use music to amplify your gameplay. Next up, I would get some XPS Foam. I hope I'm saying that right. I always get this mixed up. Let me look that up real quick. So it's XPS Foam, expanded polystyrene foam, and some paint and glue. Wood glue works pretty good, but super glue is also fine. And the nice thing with this is you can honestly make really anything that you want, right? Anything that you have the creativity to do and the time. Again, from our episode with Jay, if you want to get into more terrainscaping, you should definitely check out episode 166. But he recommends starting out with some basic risers. Essentially, these could be considered like stone plateaus or changes of levels. And by adding these onto your battle map, it makes the entire space feel much more dynamic, because there's changing of levels and there's elevation. And it just makes it a lot more interesting. But frankly, I made some, you can actually go to the dollar store and get kind of foam core poster board, which is essentially poster board with like a small 1/8 of an inch thick foam in between it. And it's nice and big. I used that to make a battle map, essentially with tiles and stuff. You can do that. You can start using that to make walls. I also used foam to sort of make the interior of this like tavern. That was pretty fun. And honestly, I'm not an artist, and I thought it came out pretty well. But a lot of foam and paint and glue goes a long way. You can do tons of stuff with that. Next up is some sort of set piece, right? And I do this, again, going back to my idea of the uniform of the Dungeon Master, but it's also about your presentation of D&D, right? If you have a game room, what's to stop you from buying some sort of like, not necessarily cheap, but definitely not battle quality shield and hanging that up behind you? I've been eyeing some replica swords on Amazon that I'd love to hang up behind me and use that as a set piece. Or maybe you get like a dice tower or something like that, or just a really nice dice tray. And that is, a functional set piece. Functional, not functual, feng shui. It's a functional set piece that allows your players to feel the ambiance of the game and really get into the mood. Next up, I would buy some LED lights, and these can be just like a simple lamp, or you could actually get bulbs that just pop into your ceiling. The nice thing about these is they are fairly versatile, or you can get like the LED strips that you can like tack on anywhere. With that one, I would just make sure you're not afraid of messing up the wall or the ceiling where you put them, because they likely will. Those are great because they can really be dynamically changed to fit whatever mood you're going for, whatever game mood you're going for. And I also like that because it has the added benefit of being festive when there's a holiday, right? If you're in Christmas time and you're not playing D&D, you can still set those lights to be green or red and it's Christmassy, right? Or same thing with Halloween. So those are versatile, not just for your hobby, but for other aspects. Next up is a simple sound system. Nowadays, a Bluetooth speaker, or at least a cheap one, definitely below $50. And if you get a simple sound system, honestly, finding stuff on YouTube or signing up with our partner Monument Studios, which is cheap enough that anyone should consider it, that just adds a whole new level to your game. You can really see the difference when you add music. And next up, I would say some minis. Now, I love minis. I'm not particularly artistic myself, so painting minis offers its own challenges. But if you want, you can go buy a small set of minis for pretty cheap. If you know someone who has a 3D printer like we do, you could pay them to print your 3D minis. And that's probably cheaper than buying them, from the game store or whatever. But game stores also need your love, so definitely support them if you can. Also, with $50, you could absolutely buy custom created minis, or at least the STLs from things like Hero Forge or Eldritch Foundry. You could make your characters or characters for your players and just level up the game that way. Next up, if you are doing online games, you could use the $50 to augment your online games, whether that's signing up for services like Roll20 or Foundry VTT, or getting a software like Dungeon Alchemist, which I love and swear by. That's what I use to make my online D&D maps or just the virtual battle maps that I use. Or signing up for, the tiers within D&D Beyond for a time, right? Those aren't going to cost you $50 instantly, but over a few months, it's probably going to add up to $50. Using stuff like that does streamline the online D&D process and just allows things to kind of go a lot more smooth. Now, to wrap it all up, obviously, I've put out episodes before where you don't need to spend any money for D&D, right? In fact, let me look up the episode. Episode 4, I literally said you don't need to spend any money to play D&D. You just need people, a story, and rules that everyone agrees to abide by. I mean, it's easier if you can record what happens, but you don't need to spend any money. This episode was just about if you wanted to and you had the extra money. You had the extra $50. And this is just what I would do. So I'm curious, what would you spend $50 on to improve your D&D hobby if you had $50 and you had to burn the money? I'm interested to see what you say, because there's probably stuff out there that I have not even realized. I haven't even delved into the cosplay aspect of it, frankly, because you all know this by now. I'm not an aesthetic person. If you saw me, you'd probably think that I got all of my clothes from, my older brothers and sisters, right? Hand-me-down clothes. Like, I didn't even choose them. They just kind of chose me, which in some cases is true. But I'm working on that, and maybe you can help me. So what would you spend $50 on to improve your D&D hobby? Now, I want to say something. You guys better come back on Thursday for our next episode, because it's going to be a doozy. We got Jay Foster from Swole Initiative coming on the show, and honestly, we have such a great conversation talking about all sorts of things. And it's really cool to get into the mind of people like Jay Foster, because he mentioned this himself, where he just kind of does things and he's been doing them for so long, he doesn't realize how impactful they can be for people like you and me. So come back on Thursday for our next handcrafted D&D episode. But until then, I hope you're having a good day, and let's go ahead and roll initiative. Brought to you by Session Zero Studios. For more information, visit sessionzerostudios.com.